She was abused by her father 200 times. When her mother knew, she did nothing. After stealing from her boss, her first husband was imprisoned. The worst thing isn't even that. At the age of 80, Joyce Meyer finally comes out with the sinister secret she has been keeping for decades. The millionaire preacher is now acknowledging that she was mistaken all along. And you will be disgusted by the terrible catastrophe that occurred in her own ministry. They never intended for you to know this narrative. The story by Joyce Meyer opens in a chaotic world. On June 4, 1943, Pauline Joyce Hutchison was born in St. Louis, Missouri, into a life already characterized by adversity. When the Second World War was going on, her father had joined the army, leaving her mother alone to handle. It was a tough and lonely period. His return just made matters worse. He was more than just a returning soldier. A man who had undergone a transformation, he was a source of anxiety rather than solace in their family. His actions was driven by manipulation and drinking, which strengthened his hold on the family. Joyce discovered faith at a young age, despite all of this chaos. Although it was more of an idea than a strong belief, she became a Christian at the age of 9. Her faith might have offered some solace, but it was eclipsed by the realities of her life. More than religion was what she needed. Her escape was necessary. What she had to go through at home was much worse than most people could ever comprehend. In addition to controlling the home, her father robbed her of everything, including her innocence. From the time she was a young child until she moved out at the age of 18, he mistreated her for over 10 years, week after week, year after year. She endured silent suffering more than 200 times. It was more than simply physical assault, either. He tricked her into thinking she couldn't tell anyone, misrepresented the facts, and said it was love. She lived in fear. Apprehension about being discovered. Fear that if she refused, he might do something. Fear that nobody would take her seriously. She was wearing a mask at school. What was going on behind closed doors was unknown to everyone. Although she had the appearance of any other student, she was secretly secluded from everyone else because of the weight of her secret. Everything at home was governed by her father. Their diet. What they watched on television before bed. There was nowhere to go, no solace, and no one to turn to. Her mother, who ought to have safeguarded her, did nothing. She understood. The signals were there, but she was too scared to take action. She kept quiet, enabling the abuse to go on. Joyce felt that this betrayal was just as painful as the actual assault. She was going through more than simply her father's mistreatment. Her mother had abandoned her. Early on, she discovered that no one could be trusted. She needed to do it by herself if she wished to live. By the time she was 18, she had given up on going to college or getting a job. All she wanted was to get away. She married a part-time car salesman as soon as she could in an attempt to get away from the suffering of her past. The man she chose, however, was not a rescuer. In addition to being a thief, he was also a womanizer. Joyce had been ignored at home and abused by her father for years. Instead of finding the stability she sought, she entered yet another nightmare. Early on, her husband began to betray her. He was erratic and cunning, going missing for days at a time. His lack of care for her welfare frequently left her stranded without money or at home. He left her without resources or transportation as they were traveling to Albuquerque. To go back, she had to rely on faraway acquaintances. He was unrestrained in his malice. David, their son, moved in with another lady when she became pregnant. After being stuck in this unhealthy marriage for 5 years, Joyce found the fortitude to escape. She later called it a nightmare that lasted for 5 years, a time of unending misery and deceit. This difficult period of her life was a direct consequence of the trauma she had experienced. She discovered more pain instead of the love and safety she sought. But her narrative didn't end there. The message that inspired millions would eventually be shaped by the hardships that almost broke her. The crime she became involved in was one of the most startling aspects of her marriage. Because of her husband, Joyce did things she never would have thought to do. She was persuaded to steal her employer's paycheck checks by him. He then cashed them and used the proceeds to cover other costs, including trips. Joyce was a young, sensitive person. She was aware that it was wrong, but she remained mute out of fear and misguided loyalty. She paid back every money she had stolen years later. She did it to put things right. However, her husband took a more sinister route. He was ultimately convicted of writing counterfeit checks and imprisoned. His apprehension made Joyce realize the reality. She had married a man who was irredeemable, and their union had only resulted in suffering. After getting a divorce, she made an effort to move on. The harm, however, was already done. Although the relationship terminated due to the divorce, the pain persisted. Joyce, now free of her spouse, was on a downward spiral. She started smoking cigarettes on a chain, went out to clubs at night, and looked for solace in brief romances. There was no rebellion. She was trying to numb the emptiness within herself. She had been broken for years by betrayal and cruelty, and she was unsure of how to get well. Joyce Meyer wed Dave Meyer, an Army veteran and engineering draftsman, in 1967. This was not only another phase of her life. It marked a sea change. Joyce had previously gone through a difficult upbringing, years of her father's violence, and a terrible first marriage that ended when her husband left her. She was deeply scarred and emotionally broken, making it difficult for her to feel safe or trusting. And then Dave appeared. Dave was unique from the moment they first met in 1966. He stood in sharp contrast to the chaos Joyce had experienced because he was calm, patient, and steadfast in his dedication. She received more than just affection and stability from their partnership. It helped her develop, recover, and eventually establish a ministry that would reach millions of people. David Meyer, Sandra Ellen McCullum, Daniel B. Meyer, and Laura Marie Holtzman were the 4 children they raised together. But there were challenges along the way. Joyce had a lot of emotional baggage when she got married. She often took her anger and deep wounds out on Dave. She exerted control. Vocally hostile, and acknowledged that she was a burden when they were married. However, Dave resisted being dragged into her tumult. For weeks at a time, Joyce gave him the silent treatment, but he stayed calm and patient. He just refused to let her discontent to define his own. He said to her one day, "I've done everything I can to make you happy, but it's clear that you're determined to be unhappy. So I'm going to enjoy my life anyway." That statement infuriated Joyce, but deep down, it struck a nerve. Dave's ability to stay joyful despite her anger forced her to look inward. She started realizing that her pain was controlling her, and unless she changed, she could lose the man who had stood by her through it all. At one point, Dave admitted he wasn't sure how much longer he could take her behavior. That scared her. It became a wake-up call, pushing her to seek healing, to let go of the past, and to start allowing God to transform her. Over time, she began to see Dave's differences not as frustrating, but as necessary. His calm, logical approach balanced her emotional intensity. His consistency gave her the security she had never known. In February 1976, Joyce Meyer was driving home from a beauty appointment when something happened that changed her life. She had been feeling frustrated and empty for a long time. She knew the Bible talked about victory, but she didn't feel victorious. That day, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She cried out to God, asking why she wasn't experiencing the life His Word promised. Then, in that moment of desperation, she felt God speak to her heart. "Joyce, I have been teaching you patience." A wave of something powerful washed over her. She later described it as if liquid love had been poured into her. It was overwhelming and unlike anything she had ever felt before. She knew this was God's presence. More than that, she knew He was calling her to something bigger. Her past had been painful. Years of sexual abuse by her father, a failed first marriage. But now she felt certain that God would use her story to help others. Later that same year, she started leading small Bible studies for a group of co-workers. These weren't formal gatherings. They took place anywhere there was space, sometimes even in restaurants. People connected with her because she spoke openly about real struggles. Her audience kept growing. And by 1980, she joined Life Christian Center in Fenton, Missouri. At the time, the church had only about 30 members, but things were about to change. Joyce started a women's Bible study in her home, and it quickly grew. In just a few weeks, over 100 people were showing up. Soon, that number grew to 500. Rick Shelton, the church's pastor, saw her potential. He made her an associate pastor in 1980, giving her a chance to develop her teaching skills. She also began recording her messages for a local radio station. It was a small step, but it was the beginning of something much bigger. In 1985, she launched her own radio program, Life in the Word. At first, the operation was tiny. The recordings were done in the basement of her home, inside her son's bedroom closet. The show started with a 15-minute weekly slot on WCBW in St. Louis. It wasn't much, but it was enough. People were listening. Within 5 years, Life in the Word had expanded to 6 stations across the Midwest. Joyce's honest and direct teaching made a strong impact. She wasn't just talking about faith. She was showing people how to apply it to real life. By 1993, her husband Dave suggested expanding into television. It was a big step, but Joyce was ready. The program aired first on WGN-TV in Chicago and then on BT. More people were tuning in and her audience kept growing. By 1998, she changed the name of the show to Enjoying Everyday Life, a title that better reflected her mission. She wasn't just teaching the Bible. She was helping people find faith in their daily lives. He saw television as a way to reach people far beyond the walls of a conference hall. Joyce was already making an impact through her live events and radio broadcasts, but television was different. It had the power to bring her message into millions of homes. She decided to go for it. Her first show, Life in the Word, aired on WGN-TV and Black Entertainment Television. WGN-TV was a superstation with national reach. BT connected her with a diverse audience. This smart choice helped her ministry grow fast. People saw something different in her. Unlike many televangelists, she wasn't just preaching. She was open about her struggles. She talked about the abuse she had suffered as a child and how faith had helped her heal. That honesty made people listen. They saw her as someone who understood real pain and offered real hope. In just 5 years, Life in the Word became Enjoying Everyday Life. By 1998, it was airing on hundreds of radio and television stations around the world. That same year, it became one of the first religious programs to be broadcast on KTBU, a Christian television network. Her message was spreading faster than ever, and more people were tuning in every day. Over time, her television program turned into a global phenomenon. Today, Enjoying Everyday Life is broadcast in more than 100 countries and translated into 113 languages. It reaches an estimated 4.5 billion people. But Joyce Meyer didn't stop at television. She used every platform she could to spread her message. Social media, online streaming, and radio helped her connect with even more people. One reason for her success is how she talks about everyday struggles. She teaches people how to deal with emotional pain, financial problems, and personal setbacks. Her lessons feel practical, not just theoretical. People relate to that. They don't just watch her. They apply what she says in their lives. Beyond her broadcasts, she has made a huge impact through humanitarian work. Her initiatives, like Hand of Hope and Project GRL, have helped people worldwide. These programs provide food, medical care, and disaster relief to communities in need. Her work goes beyond words. It changes lives. Her influence doesn't stop at television and charity. Joyce Meyer has written more than 130 books, making her one of the most prolific Christian authors of modern times. Her journey as a writer began in 1988 when she published Tell Them I Love Them. Over the years, her books have reached millions, covering topics like faith, emotional healing, and personal growth. Some of her works have become staples in Christian self-help literature. In 1995, she released Battlefield of the Mind, a book that changed the way many Christians viewed negative thinking. She explained how mental struggles could become spiritual battles and showed readers how to overcome doubt and fear through biblical principles. This book became her most widely read work and remains one of her bestsellers. She continued to write books that touched on different aspects of faith and personal development. The Confident Woman, released in 2006, encouraged women to embrace their self-worth. Living Beyond Your Feelings, published in 2011, taught readers how to manage emotions instead of letting them take control. She also wrote devotionals like Trusting God Day by Day in 2012 and Hearing from God each morning in 2004, offering readers daily spiritual guidance. Her ability to write across different genres became clear when she released The Penny, her first fiction novel. It told a powerful story of redemption and forgiveness, proving that her message could reach people in new and creative ways. Her books have not only inspired readers, but have also been incredibly successful. As a #1 New York Times best-selling author, she has sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Her writing is known for being simple and relatable, helping people understand complex spiritual ideas without feeling overwhelmed. She continues to release multiple books every year, often reworking her teachings into new formats to reach a broader audience. Her commitment to spreading biblical wisdom through writing has never slowed down. But success has not come without controversy. In 2002, she signed a $10 million publishing deal with Hachette Book Group. This agreement allowed Hatchett's Faith Words division to acquire her backlist while continuing to publish new books under their label. The deal brought her work to an even bigger audience and led to more than $30 million in sales. However, some critics questioned whether she was profiting too much from her ministry's resources. Concerns about her finances grew when reports surfaced about her lifestyle. She owned a $10 million corporate jet, multiple million-dollar homes, and expensive furnishings for her ministry headquarters. Some watchdog organizations, like Wall Watchers, began calling for an IRS investigation into her finances. The scrutiny pushed Meyer to make changes. In 2004, she reduced her salary, which had been $900,000 per year, and decided to keep royalties from book sales rather than donating them back to her ministry. Joyce Meyer Ministries' Hand of Hope initiative has changed millions of lives. In places where hunger is a daily struggle, Hand of Hope provides meals to those who need them most. In Ethiopia, where droughts have left families without food, the initiative has worked with organizations like Feed My Starving Children to distribute over 500,000 meals. These efforts became even more critical during the 2011 Horn of Africa drought when food shortages reached crisis levels. Every meal is more than just food. It's a reminder that someone cares. Medical care is another way Hand of Hope makes a difference. Since it began, the initiative has treated over 3.9 million patients in 40 countries. In Ethiopia, the HOH Pediatric Specialty Clinic provides long-term care for malnourished children, sometimes for weeks or even months. Many of these children arrive on the brink of starvation and leave healthy and strong. The program also includes short-term medical clinics offering mammograms, eye exams, and dental care in places where doctors are scarce. When disaster strikes, Hand of Hope is there. In 2010, monsoon floods in Pakistan left thousands homeless. The initiative stepped in to provide 200 families with food, kitchen supplies, and beds. 3 years later, when a massive earthquake hit a warren, Hand of Hope sent emergency aid, including tents and survival supplies. Whether it's a hurricane, wildfire, or earthquake, this team moves fast to help people recover. In the United States, Joyce Meyer Ministries reaches struggling communities through the St. Louis Dream Center, founded by Joyce and her husband Dave in 2000. Located in the heart of St. Louis, Missouri, this church is more than a place of worship. It's a center for people fighting homelessness, addiction, and poverty. Every month, the Dream Center provides 70,000 meals through its food pantry and soup kitchen. For children who rely on school meals, an after-school program serves dinner to 500 kids every week. Food isn't the only thing people find here. They find stability in a world that often feels unpredictable. Joyce Meyer has been one of the most well-known figures in the prosperity gospel movement. This belief teaches that faith can bring financial blessings and that wealth is a sign of God's favor. Many have criticized this idea, saying it twists the Bible's teachings. The Bible often talks about humility and suffering as key parts of faith, but prosperity preaching focuses more on material success. One of Meyer's most controversial teachings was that personal hardships happen because of a lack of faith. She once suggested that sickness or even the death of a child could be the result of not believing enough. Many saw this as a harsh message that blamed people for their suffering. Over time, this idea pushed many away and led to deeper discussions about faith and God's role in human struggles. In 2019, Meyer made a surprising statement. She admitted that her views on prosperity and faith had been out of balance. She posted a video on Instagram where she reflected on her past teachings. She said, "If you got sick, you didn't have enough faith. If your child died, you didn't have enough faith." Well, that's not right. This marked a big shift from what she had preached for decades. Some saw this as an important change, while others felt it was not enough to undo years of misleading teachings. Beyond prosperity preaching, Meyer has also been criticized for promoting controversial beliefs that many theologians reject. One of her most debated claims was that Jesus temporarily stopped being the Son of God during his crucifixion. She also suggested that Jesus took on the nature of Satan while paying for humanity's sins in hell. This goes against traditional Christian teaching, which says that Jesus remained fully divine even in his death. Her belief that Jesus needed to be born again in hell connects with the Word of Faith movement, a group often accused of twisting biblical truths. Meyer has also taught that believers are little gods who share divine qualities. This idea is common in some charismatic circles, but is rejected by most Christian leaders. She has also linked everyday misfortunes to demonic forces, which has led some to believe she encourages superstition. Because of these teachings, Meyer has faced strong backlash from Christian organizations. The Christian Research Institute has called her message a false gospel, arguing that it misrepresents Scripture and leads people into spiritual confusion. Even with all this criticism, Meyer has not fully backed away from these beliefs. Moreover, people have questioned her extravagant lifestyle. One of the biggest sources of criticism is her spending. In 2003, an investigation by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch revealed that Meyer and her family were living in multi-million-dollar homes, all reportedly bought by the ministry. Her personal residence alone was worth $2 million. Four additional homes purchased for her children were valued at another $2 million. These properties were located in a gated community in St. Louis County and came with expensive landscaping and high-end furnishings. But it wasn't just real estate. Meyer's ministry also spent huge amounts on luxury items for its headquarters, a 158,000 square foot building. Financial records showed that $5.7 million went toward furniture and artwork. Among the most shocking purchases was a $30,000 malachite round table, a $23,000 antique commode with a marble top, and a $14,000 custom office bookcase. The spending didn't stop there. The ministry also bought a $19,000 pair of Dresden vases and 6 French crystal vases for $18,500. Perhaps the most controversial purchase was a $10 million Gulfstream IV private jet. Meyer used it for ministry work and speaking engagements, but critics argued that a private jet went far beyond what was necessary for a religious leader. While many televangelists have similar expenses, Meyer's spending became a focal point in debates about financial responsibility in faith-based organizations. When questioned, she defended her lifestyle, saying she was blessed and saw no reason to apologize. But watchdog groups have continued to push for more transparency in her financial practices. The concerns over her finances eventually led to government scrutiny. In 2007, the U.S. Senate Finance Committee launched an investigation into 6 major televangelists, including Meyer. The effort, led by Senator Chuck Grassley, aimed to find out whether these ministries were misusing their tax-exempt status. One of the biggest red flags was Meyer's salary. At one point, she was making $900,000 per year, while her husband, Dave Meyer, earned $450,000. After facing backlash, she announced she would reduce her salary and instead rely on book royalties. But critics argued this change didn't make much difference, as her book still brought in enormous profits. The investigation also revealed questionable expenses, including reports of cosmetic surgery and foreign bank accounts. One of the most talked about details was the $23,000 marble-topped antique commode, which became a symbol of excessive spending. Grassley requested financial records to determine whether these expenses violated IRS rules. In response, Joyce Meyer Ministries took steps to improve transparency. In 2009, they joined the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability and added non-family members to the board. The IRS did not revoke the ministry's tax-exempt status, but emphasized that non-profit organizations must serve public interests rather than personal wealth. Beyond financial concerns, Meyer's ministry has also faced accusations of nepotism. Her family holds key leadership positions, raising questions about fairness and accountability. Dave Meyer has been the ministry's vice president since the beginning. Their son, Daniel Meyer, now serves as CEO of U.S. operations. Another son, David Meyer, leads Hand of Hope, the ministry's outreach arm. Their daughters, Laura Marie and Sandra Ellen, also hold important roles. Many believe these positions were given based on family ties rather than qualifications. Reports also suggest that Meyer's ministry spent millions on homes for her children, along with covering utilities and maintenance costs. Watchdog groups argue that this setup makes it difficult to separate the ministry's finances from the personal wealth of the Meyer family. As Joyce Meyer has stepped back from some leadership duties, her son Daniel has taken on more responsibility. But this shift has raised concerns about whether the organization is being run as a family business, rather than a faith-based nonprofit. The Christopher Coleman case was one of the most shocking scandals tied to Joyce Meyer Ministries. On May 5, 2009, Christopher Coleman murdered his wife Sherry and their 2 sons, Garrett and Gavin, inside their home in Columbia, Illinois. Coleman was the head of security for Joyce Meyer Ministries, but behind the scenes, he was living a double life. He was having an affair with Tara Lintz, a woman who had been Sherry's high school friend. Investigators later discovered that Coleman had been planning to leave his family to start a new life with Lintz. But instead of filing for divorce, he staged a brutal crime. 4 months before the murders, Coleman had been sending himself anonymous death threats. He told people that his family was being targeted because of his work with Joyce Meyer Ministries. It was all a lie. The threats were his way of creating an alibi. When police dug deeper, they found emails and phone records exposing his affair. The evidence was overwhelming. In 2011, Coleman was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Sherry's family believed the tragedy could have been prevented. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Joyce Meyer Ministries, arguing that the organization ignored warning signs. They claimed the ministry knew about Coleman's affair and the supposed death threats but failed to take action. The lawsuit accused them of not doing enough to protect Sherry and the children. Joyce Meyer Ministries denied any responsibility. They stated that even law enforcement had not predicted the crime. In February 2013, a judge dismissed the case, ruling there was no legal basis to hold the ministry accountable. The case left lasting questions. How much did Joyce Meyer Ministries really know? Could they have done something to stop it? The scandal raised concerns about accountability within religious organizations. It showed how personal misconduct could spiral into a tragedy that reached far beyond one person's actions. Years later, another controversy brought Joyce Meyer Ministries into the headlines. In January 2025, Meyer made a bold decision to pause her program, Enjoying Everyday Life on Daystar television network. The show had aired on Daystar for nearly 20 years, but allegations against the network's leadership forced a change. Joni Lamb, the president and co-founder of Daystar, was accused by her son, Jonathan Lamb, and his wife, Susie, of covering up sexual abuse claims. They alleged that between 2020 and 2021, a family member had abused their 5-year-old daughter, and that Joni had tried to protect the accused instead of seeking justice. The accusations didn't stop there. They also claimed Joni was involved in financial misconduct and spiritual abuse. Joyce Meyer Ministries took a firm stand. They explained that as an organization committed to integrity, they could not ignore such serious allegations. Meyer, who has openly shared her own experience as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, felt a personal responsibility to act. Her son, Dan Meyer, sent an email to staff stating that the allegations deeply troubled them and that the ministry stood for truth. They left open the possibility of returning to Daystar, but only if the situation was resolved in a way that aligned with their values. Daystar responded by denying the claims and insisting that law enforcement would clear their leadership. They assured viewers that their mission remained strong, but Joyce Meyer was not the only one walking away. Other well-known Christian figures, including Jack Graham and Jesse Duplantis, also cut ties with the network. The scandal exposed deeper issues in faith-based media. It showed how allegations of abuse and financial misconduct could shake even the most established Christian organization.